I'm bored. What plaything can you offer me today?
An obscure body in the SK system, Your Majesty. The inhabitants refer to it as the planet Earth.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to Grubby Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema podcast, the show where we go back to the blockbuster new release file in our memory. We take a copy off the shelf, we pop it in our VCR, and we see what time has done to it. I'm Justin, that guy's Mike.
Justin, I love you, but I only have about an hour to do this podcast.
And together we're here to help you navigate all the landmines littered down memory lane. So Mike, we're getting into a big one. I would call this a Criterion episode.
It was funny. I was telling my wife just a couple days ago. This movie was probably the most watched HBO movie I saw when I was, in my youthful preteen years. In the early '80s, it was like on constant rotation on HBO in the early '80s. And
you could throw Poltergeist in that mix too, but I probably watched this movie over 100 times. So that's literally 100 times in my lifetime. But more importantly than that, I think I would even attribute the genesis of this podcast to this movie. Like when I was formulating how I wanted to come up with this thing, this before you were even born, Mike.
Oh no.
Yeah, this was one of those seminal movies that I thought about, that I pictured in my brain about talking about. So it really kind of inspired this podcast in a weird way. Take a movie like this and go back and look at it. So you could say this
one and Twister.
Yeah. So, this is as old as the podcast itself. So we're going to jump into it. So we're going to talk about the sci-fi epic from 1980, Flash Gordon, this week, guys. And we couldn't be happier about it.
Savior of the universe, and mostly just Earth, though.
Well, he'll save every one of us. If you listen to the lyrics properly.
He'll save every one of us!
Oh, I can't wait to talk about this. All right, so let's just kind of jump in. So this was directed by Mike Hodges, who we remember from the original Get Carter, the cool one. He's also the director of Damien Owen 2, but he got about halfway through and just quit because of creative differences here. He was actually the 8th pick to direct this, Mike. Dino De Laurentiis is the infamous producer of this film, and he wanted this to go more Italian. So his first pick was Sergio Leone, but he left the project because he felt the script wasn't true to the original comic book source. That's kind of splitting hairs in this kind of genre, I guess, but whatever. Right. And Federico Fellini was also considered, and a handful of other international directors, but 8th time's the charm, I guess.
Better late than never!
It's also written by a trio of screenwriters, the first guy being Lorenzo Semple. He's a pretty prolific screenwriter. Yeah. We know him from Papillon, both versions, the new remake and the original. He wrote a lot of 60s TV stuff. He wrote the King Kong 76 version, the screenplay for that. So don't hold that against him too much. He did some Bond films too. Never Say Never was one of his bigger ones. So it was also co-written by a guy named Michael Allen, who did Truck Turner. Fantastic blaxploitation film starring Chef Isaac Hayes.
Isaac Hayes.
Yeah. Subtle little period piece, Mike. You'd love it.
Very subtle, yes.
Yeah. I also wrote Enter the Dragon.
Fantastic.
Yeah, great. So
anybody can handle John Saxon, So Ace is my book.
This guy spends a good bit of his screenplays about throwing haymakers.
Yes.
He lets his fists do the talking. And of course, it's all based off the source material from the original comic book in the 30s by Alex Raymond. So, who happens to be the great uncle of Kevin Dillon and Matt Dillon. Anybody's keeping score at home. Yeah.
Wow.
So this had a budget of $20 million back in 1980. This was a very expensive movie. Did not pay out as they would have liked. We'll get that here in a second. And it was released on December 5th, 1980.
Wow. So kind of a Christmassy movie. We should have had this on one of our Christmas lists and on our past podcast.
Certainly more Christmassy than Die Hard, but we'll wait to December to pick up that conversation again. This was a lot of fun. As we talked about in some previous podcasts, you had Star Wars and Star Trek, and American cinema kind of drifted back into the sci-fi genre. And this was the first. I mean, there weren't a whole lot of movies adapted from comic books then. That's basically all they're adapted from now. But this one really had an interesting cast and a lot of interesting, things to deliver. So, Mike, why don't you walk us through this behemoth cast
Oh
that brought
yes,
this epic together?
this is B movie heaven for a lot of these guys. Principals are Flash Gordon himself is played by Sam J. Jones. I can't remember when the J was added for his middle initial. I always thought he was just Sam Jones.
It stands for jerk at first.
But he's not. But he's not Sam. Not to be confused with just Sam Jones. And he's a blonde chin guy. They kind of must have been the casting for him for this role of Flash Gordon. Later starred in a lot of B movies. It's actually a former football player and almost made it on the Seattle Seahawks, but not quite. And a lot. You look at his Wikipedia page, filled to the brim with movies you probably never heard of, and just the B movie role is just there. But most recently was in Ted and Ted 2, both of those movies, and he played himself. So I thought that was interesting.
As mostly a result of the cult following from
exactly.
this movie too. Yeah.
And then you have Dale Arden, who is played by Melody Anderson, another B movie star. You can just look at her list, but claim to fame that I could remember was she was supposed to be the lead in Manimal, which was an NBC show that never came off the ground. It was one of those movies that was lampooned by, and even like Johnny Carson, who worked for NBC, made fun of this TV show. And again, you look at her Wikipedia page, you see film after film of kind of just their movies, and I think she's like a social worker or a family addiction therapist now. So good for her.
Yeah, I think she retired from acting in the mid '90s or something. Yeah. She should have run on Jake and the Fat Man, which would probably make anybody want to retire from acting.
Yeah,
but I think she's a licensed social worker now, just like doing good stuff.
And she
spends a good chunk of her life just hitting the convention circuits, like a lot of these people do.
And she's not in any more movies like Police Calendar Pinup Girl or whatever it was called.
Yeah, she still looks great though.
Yeah,
really,
for 70s,
very well.
Something years old.
She looks good for sure.
We have our evil villain, Ming the Merciless, played by Max von Sydow, who is not German, by the way, even though he's great in Victory or whatever that movie's called.
He plays German in everything, or German adjacent.
Right? Yeah, he's actually French Swedish, which is interesting. We've seen him before in our podcast of Dune from 1984. I think he's off pretty early in that movie, but
do you want to say the line, or do you want me to do it, Mike?
You go ahead.
Urine and feces are processed in the thigh pads.
Okay. He was in one of his most famous roles. He's the priest in Exorcist and Exorcist 2. Great roles. He's always this kind of evil, pseudo-evil, adjacent kind of characters in these movies, and I think he was even in one of the, I think one of his last roles was one of the Star Wars, sequel movies from Disney.
Yeah.
We have Brian Blessed, who's not to be confused with John Rhys Davies, but very close.
Yeah.
He plays Voltan.
It's like a Bill Pullman, Bill Paxton situation.
It is. It's the beard. He plays Voltan, who's the leader of the Hawkmen. He's another one of those Shakespearean English actors who's in a lot of movies before this.
This guy should be in every movie.
I know. But it seems like there's so many guys that we've had in these podcasts that are like these English, Shakespearean trained actors who end up in these kind of like cheesy sci-fi movies. It's like
they must do it for a lark, just to break the
But it becomes their most famous role. I mean,
I'm sure they're very proud of that too.
I mean, who knows Brian Blessed from being an I Claudius?
Right.
Maybe a handful. But hey, he was Voltan. He's the guy who should be doing the circuit with Melanie Anderson.
Yeah.
You have Topol. He's an Israeli actor. He most famous for playing a Jewish, I'm going to say Mitch kind of guy that was in Fiddler on the Roof.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm surprised he didn't say If I Were a Rich Man and like hum that during this movie, but he didn't. I always thought he was Greek. He was in For Your Eyes Only, and that's the only movie I can remember him actually seeing him in before, other than Flash Gordon he was in that movie, but no, he's Israeli, and sadly passed away, I think, just a couple of years ago. Other people in our cast, I know you want to know about George Harris. He was briefly in this movie as Prince Thune, He gets killed by Ming with his ring. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
He has one of those, George Harris has one of those faces. You're like, well, I know that guy. He was in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He
That's
was the
correct.
captain of the ship.
The cargo ship. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he was also one of the wizards in Harry Potter movies. I'm sorry, Potterheads. I don't remember his name, but he was in like 4 or 5. He was in the later movies, but
Yeah.
he's one of the good guys in those movies.
Great character actor.
And we also had another Harry Potter actor, Robbie Coltrane.
Oh, you spotted it. Okay.
That appears just for a couple of seconds at the very start of this movie, where he's at the airfield with our heroes.
Yeah.
And Timothy Dalton's in this movie. Anyone know Timothy Dalton? He was the 4th James Bond, and he was one of the greatest villains ever in the movie Hot Fuzz. But he plays Prince Baron in this movie. He does his Timothy Dalton kind of acting.
Yeah.
You have 2 dwarfs, Kenny Baker and, well, there's other dwarfs, but the ones I picked out were Kenny Baker and Deep Roy. Deep Roy was the Indian actor he was also an Ewok, whereas Kenny Baker was R2-D2. But
Yeah.
Deep Roy was also in the Willy Wonka movie, the more recent one with Johnny Depp.
He was all of the Oompa Loompas.
Yes, and for you Mystery Science Theater people out there, he was also in Alien from L.A., and he had these really ugly eyebrows, and he would like stare through this like magnifying glass. So anybody watch that movie, and there's probably 2 of you, maybe 1 of you out there. Ugh.
I want to say, I could be wrong, but I think he was a stand-in as a Hobbit on the Lord of the Rings series for.
Cool.
I think he was there as well. So.
Well, there you go.
Guy gets a lot of work. I looked at his page, and he's been acting for 70 years.
Well, it's the same as like Billy Bart. Remember him?
Yeah.
Billy Barty. It was like in every movie that required a dwarf back in the 60s and 70s. You just look it up, and there he is. Now it's this Deep Roy guy. It seems like it's if it's not Peter Dinklage, but Peter Dinklage doesn't want those kind of roles given to. But anyway,
typecasting.
That's right. I don't want. That's a subject for another podcast.
Yeah, we're dangerously close to something. Let's keep moving.
I know. If another guy who had a blink and you'll miss it role in here was Philip Stone, who was in The Shining as the previous caretaker bartender in The Shining. He's in this role. It's like a priest at the very end. Yeah,
the high priest.
Isn't that weird? Another English actor. This movie was loaded with English guys, right?
Yeah.
And then we had a couple of slices of really fine provolone with Ornelia Muti and I'm going to mispronounce her name, but Mariangela Mulatto.
Yeah.
And they, one of them was the evil General Mulatto was, and then Muti was the really, really attractive Princess Aura. I'm going
to go on record. She's probably the most attractive Ornella on record. I think Ornella Muti. Yeah.
Yeah. Ornelia. Is it Ornelia or no Ornella?
I'm sure someone.
I'll look it up. Yes, please. Please email Justin. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
And finally,
another actress that looks amazing to this day. She looks great.
Does she still look hot?
Younger than us. So, yeah.
Of course she does. Everybody looks younger than us.
Yeah, it's good. Low bar.
Except for maybe Brian Blessed. Bless his heart.
Or Sunshine Perkins.
And last but not least, we have Riff Raff from Rocky Horror Picture Shows, and he appears in this movie briefly as one of Prince Baron's little underlings, right hand man, and Richard O'Brien's the guy's name, and plays the flute very well.
Good evening. Yeah, great.
Good evening. Yeah.
Good evening. All right, thanks, Mike. There's just some other notes on that cast. So, Kurt Russell was in the lead to play this, but he didn't want to play like a farcical lead hero.
So he went to Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah. 3 years later, did the exact same thing. He was picked because Dino De Laurentiis' mom saw him on the dating game. Sam Jones on the dating game, so he looks attractive. So. But he had darker hair. They had to dye his hair blonde, and they had to dye Melody Anderson's hair as well because they both had the wrong hair color. Speaking of Melody Anderson, Dale's role was also considered for Debbie Harry. The role of Dr. Hans Zarkov, played so well by Geert Topol, was also given to Dennis Hopper.
Oh, wow.
I think he might have been really good in this.
He had been really quirky, right? Pretty good.
And Dennis Hopper in 1980.
Yeah, he was. He was still recovering, but
Keith Carradine was also considered for Ming the Merciless. We talked about Brian Blessed. Mikey forgot he was also Boss Nass in the Phantom Menace, the main Gungan.
Oh.
Jar Jar's president.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, remember
Oh
he
no.
had
Oh, I
the
didn't. I mean, I didn't recognize him with the makeup, of course.
he thought your brain's so big.
They think their brain's so big.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
horrible. Peter Wingard played Clytus. Clytus was not in the original comic book. They just added his character to
Yeah.
facilitate the story, which I thought was pretty cool. I thought he was like an evil C-3PO when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You mentioned Philip Stone as the high priest that marries the two at the end. He played Grady in The Shining. Uh, he corrected his family, Mike. Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Uh, you also, I think you might have missed or maybe intentionally left off the list here, actor William Hootkins, who we've
Oh
talked
yeah.
about
No.
several times. He played Topol's assistant, Dr. Munson.
Yeah, he was in Raiders of the Lost Ark, wasn't he?
He was the pudgy yet
Yeah.
diligent bureaucrat from Washington, D.C. that recruited.
Yes.
You know,
Pudge.
but he'll forever his most famous role, of course, is that he played Porkins in Star Wars at the end there. He's the first fatality of the Battle of Yavin. His famous line there was, "I'm all right, I'm all right,"
All right.
and then
That's the guy.
he's
Okay.
not all right. But just a wonderful cast there. Lucas originally wanted to, speaking of Star Wars, wanted to direct this. He had always kind of envisioned writing this kind of like serial pulp thing with a cliffhanger. And this is the inspiration for Star Wars. So he decided since he couldn't get the rights from Federico Fellini, he would just write Star Wars instead. And I think he did okay. Queen, the band Queen, of course, is famous for the soundtrack here. They're almost synonymous with each other. They weren't the original choice for the soundtrack.
Wow.
I think Pink Floyd was the first band that Dino considered, which might have been an interesting take on that.
Yeah.
He actually said, "Who are the Queens?" is when they asked about having Queen do this, but he didn't.
I'm surprised to say. By the way, which one's pink?
Yeah, he had no idea who they were. The original Flash Gordon played Polo in the 1930s serial shorts, but they didn't feel that the Polo would translate well, so they made him a quarterback for the New York Jets. Spike, so he's
Modernized it. Yeah,
he's the winner. uh,
Why the
Sam-
Jets?
yeah.
Man, gosh.
Sam J. Jones had a bit of a falling out with De Laurentiis after principal photography was finished, to the point where he wasn't asked to come back to do any pickups or additional post production. So a lot of the dialogue here is Sam Jones' voice impersonation. They didn't really want him back on set anymore, given the way they left things with that. So
Yeah, there's some weird dubbing.
yeah, you can tell in some spots it doesn't sound right. But to this day, there's suspicions on who did the acting, but no one's ever really confirmed who the alternate additional voice was.
It'd be like admitting you were a scab who crossed the picket lines or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. He also spent a lot of time like getting into fights on the set, like physical fights. It was more or less just a big problem.
Jeez.
We talked about Timothy Dalton. There, being Bond, there are a total of 13 actors that were in Bond films that were also in this movie as well. So these neat little hodgepodge of pop culture crossover there. It was a fun movie. It had a lot of build up, a lot of buzz. Didn't ultimately deliver. I guess we'll get into the detail of that a little bit. But 1980 we just turned into a new decade, and there's a lot of stuff going on in 1980, Mike. So when this movie came out, movies in the theater were Heaven's Gate and Raging Bull. Both those were released a few weeks earlier. The week after Flash Gordon premiered, you had the movie Popeye come out, which you could argue is just as disturbing.
I was gonna say,
on some levels.
Yeah, three bummers right there.
Yeah, and then it got a little bit stronger. You had Stir Crazy, Any Which Way You Can, and 9 to 5 all came out as like Christmas holiday events. This was the premiere time when most studios didn't pay a lot of attention to summer releases. They put all their high-profile films into the Christmas season. The box office that year, Empire Strikes Back, of course, was the biggest hit. That was the #1 box office that year. Followed closely by 9 to 5, Stir Crazy. Kramer versus Kramer got the 4th spot that year, also won Best Picture. And Any Which Way You Can was the 5th highest box office that year. So
amazing. Just
Flash
Gordon
was
a sequel too.
Yeah, Flash Gordon itself only came in about 18. So it was I guess we'll get to that when we wrap up here. On the music scene, Mike, we always feel compelled to talk about music where we get the chance. not the greatest of times for pop
1980.
music.
Yeah.
So on the charts, this is the sequential order of how they were on the AP on the top 40. You had "More Than I Can Say" by Leo Sayer,
Hmm.
who I'm convinced played was the doppelganger for
Richard Simmons.
I was going with Slim Goodbody on Captain Kangaroo.
Yeah, they're pretty close. It's the hair.
Look it up, guys. You'll see what I'm talking about. You had "Love on the Rocks" by Neil Diamond.
Yeah,
I
from
got a
his
little
movie, from his wonderful movie, Jazz.
jazz singer. Yeah,
Jazz singer. Yeah.
we'll get to Neil a little bit later.
His relationship with Lucy Arnaz didn't go well in that movie.
Didn't go
so.
well. Not yeah. You had the song "Lady"
Oh,
by
yes.
roaster master himself, Kenny Rogers.
Written by Lionel Richie.
Yeah. I don't know which version I dislike more. That's going to keep them both there. It's a tie. Hit Me With Your Best Shot by Pat Benatar, infusing a little guitar in there every now and then. And the number 5 song was "Every Woman in the World" by
Oh my gosh, Air Supply again.
Air Supply.
Wow.
Would you really
I feel like the last movie podcast we did had an Air Supply song.
Would you really want your woman to be every woman in the world to you? That's a lot to
You're
handle.
my fantasy, you're my everything. I don't know. That's a good one. We'll have to ask, what's it? Graham Hitchcock was his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to ask him. I don't know. If
Okay.
he's still, is that we'll have to
Yeah.
ask the Aussies.
Okay.
Maybe it's an Australian thing, Just. We don't understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I care. All right. Now that I think about it. Some other stuff going on in 1980, Mike. We were watching Dukes of Hazzard.
You were.
I was.
I didn't.
You
I
were above
refused.
that? Okay.
Yeah.
Trust
Me, after you had to hear the Dixie horns in every car in your hometown for constantly going off, you did not want to see that show.
Yeah. So people in the Midwest like me, this was interesting. For you, it was just a documentary. I only bring up Dukes of Hazzard because I want to talk about Pernell Brooks a little bit, who played Boss Hogg. So you talked about Sorrell Brooks. You talked about people being famous for stupid stuff. So he will ever be, the 5'6" Boss Hogg trying to get them Duke boys, right, Mike? But the guy, he was actually a dramatic actor. Did
Shakespearean trained? Yes.
Trained at Yale. He spoke 18 languages, 12 of them very fluently. He was a counterintelligence officer in the Korean War, but he's going to be remembered as Boss Hogg.
Oh, I know.
I love that.
But think about James Best. He could have been known for being in the Killer Shrews movie, but
I just watched that last night. It's so weird you said that.
He becomes Sheriff Roscoe P. Coltrane. And I mean, everybody knows him as Roscoe from Dukes of Hazzard. Poor fella.
That's great. We used to watch a show with the lead actor named Cooter. Like,
yeah,
that was a big.
He
thing.
still advertises himself too. Like,
of course
you can go to his garage. He has like a museum and stuff in Georgia. So yeah.
Oh, that's going to be on his tombstone as well. It should be.
He embraced it. Yeah,
you got to own it. Here lies Cooter.
That's right.
Another weird story. 1980. A guy named William Bergstrom took 2 suitcases into the Binion's Horseshoe. One was filled with $777,000. The other was completely empty. He put the entire balance on the craps table to double up, and he did. He just filled up the other suitcase and doubled up his money for $777,000. And I'm sure the mob probably killed him a couple days later.
How dare you win?
Yeah. So
and not play anymore. Come on.
Gas would run you about $1.19. In today's inflation adjusted, that's $7.20. A microwave would cost you $575 back then, Mike.
And weighed a ton.
It weighed a ton. About you drop about $2,000 to get a baked potato in 8 minutes. The best you could do on a color TV was a 19-inch one with cathode ray tube. And that would run you $380, which is about the same as putting down $1,500 on TV today.
And God forbid you try to get one that had a remote control. Wow.
Yeah, you can get 55-inch on Amazon for that dollar amount now. The Voyager 1 reached Saturn in 1980, and it was quickly found by William Shatner a couple of years later.
That's right. And did some weird stuff too.
Yeah.
I just watched a show where they had that same concept. There was a German show called The Signal.
Oh yeah.
And it just came out, and it it was related to that theme. I don't want to give away. Can I give away spoilers? Is anybody gonna watch this show? Nah.
No.
It was the Voyager 2 return, and everybody thought it was an alien ship, but no, it was just somehow they sent it back to us, and it landed in the desert somewhere in Africa. And
Here, you take it.
there you go. We don't want the Voyager. Nobody wants the Voyager.
Who cares about Voyager? Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. Speaking of caring about anything, Ronald Reagan was our new president when this movie came out. And then I think the biggest, most monumental thing here, Mike, is in 1980. The novel Congo was released. Michael Crichton's Congo.
Yes.
Wonderfully adapted 15 years later.
Yes. What a wonderful piece of film that is. Wow.
All right. For those of you just maybe flipping in for the first time, we have talked about Congo. It's a season premiere of our second season. We enjoyed it very much.
I think we ought to do another podcast on it, Justin.
Yeah.
A revisit, if you will.
Yeah. Congo redo.
Yes. There was a lot that went on that movie. We didn't even touch the surface on.
You know what? It does deserve a second look, Mike.
A deeper dive, as they say.
Well, I think we were too afraid to really get into the weeds with that movie because the surface was dangerous enough.
Well, it's like when Zayas told Heston at the end of the Apes movie, you're not gonna like what you see. I don't think a deeper dive we would find anything better in there.
Yeah, you're pretty. Yeah, we did want to go too much deeper. But that was the general state of the country around 1980. As we mentioned before, any Gen Xer, and I don't usually like using terms like that on this podcast, but I'm going to. We grew up with this movie. Just about anybody over the age of probably 40 has seen this hundreds of times. As a result of their environment, they were kind of trapped. This is before the internet and before streaming services. And if you're lucky enough to get cable, you had maybe one channel or two. And HBO, like you said, Mike, ran this movie pretty much ad nauseum.
Yeah, this was one of their. You remember the HBO book, the little square book they would give you every month?
Yeah, HBO guide, yeah.
Yeah, and at the back, they would have like the older movies, and they would just be. They didn't have pictures with those; they just had the list of them. Flash Gordon would be on there, and obviously in alphabetical order. But then the times they would show it would be like Wednesday 8, Thursday 1, Friday 2. It was like
it had its own page. Yeah,
it did. It was just constantly on there. Like, oh my god, I'll never be able to miss this.
Yeah,
it was great.
But it was one of those things where you could catch it anywhere, and I guess some of it's because the story and it was shiny and the colors and the music and all. I mean, there's a lot of eye candy here. There's a lot of, I guess I'm trying to discern this nostalgic stuff away from it, but it's something that it catches your eye, and because of the pulpiness of the script and the ridiculousness of the acting and the content, and it's just there's something of the magnetism of this movie that just keeps you in there. I guess you pile on the fact that there was nothing else on either, or nothing else to do. It really kind of embedded in our DNA, and as you mentioned, like the cult status of this film is beyond measure. It's probably the prototypical cult movie. It's imprinted itself on pop culture in several ways, and I guess the best way to really to pay homage to it is kind of go through the scenes here and see. We can kind of just go through the narrative here really quickly for those that haven't seen it. We're going to spoil it for you, but I think everybody here can probably just read along with us, and they can see these scenes in their brains as we're mentioning them. So that should probably do. We should probably get into a quick summary. So, Mike, there's nothing else to say. Hit the button. What I like here is that it opens with these crosshairs, this reticle of like the Flash Gordon logo, and the Earth is in its crosshairs, and you get the voiceover of Ming, and he's saying he's bored.
Oh yeah, what plaything do you have for me?
Yeah. So you get this dialogue. You don't know who's talking. I love how they refer to it as Earth.
Planet inhabitants call it Earth. Yeah.
And then he proceeds to play around with it. So he's got this wonderful.
I love his buttons. Buttons.
Yes, he's got this amazing dash.
He's more powerful at the start of the movie than he is at the later part of the movie.
He kind of gets a little soft there, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, imagine a guy that has literally a panel that has a dozen buttons. You can point. You can literally target a planet from in the SK system.
Yeah,
and which I'm assuming was light years away, and he's able to hit a button for volcano eruptions, earthquakes, My favorite was the hot hell button.
Hot hail. I need that
Hot
button
hail.
on my keyboard.
Yes. And he just hits a button and, starts an immediate earthquake. And it's just like, oh,
Yeah, so
cool.
so he hits the button, and you see some stock footage of some natural disasters, and the Earth is blown up, and he can't. It's the funniest thing he's ever seen.
And he wants to play with it for a little while.
Yeah, and then the Queen music kicks in, and then the credits start. And what I really like about the credits, I mean, of course, besides Brian May's guitar just kicking you in the face right away, is that they had the original OG artwork.
This is pre-Marvel too.
Marvel did that years later, and everybody thought they
Yeah.
applauded them for it like they were geniuses. But the opening credits of the scene are amazing because it's just original artwork from the 1930s comic book.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just great iconic art there that I appreciated more on my 101st viewing.
Well, I appreciate it more too after, like you said, that the congratulatory kind of approach we've had toward Marvel movies. It's like, wait,
Yeah.
these guys did it, 30 plus years earlier. So it's
Yeah.
like,
So for those younger viewers, or maybe some older viewers that aren't as attuned, play a game in your head as we're going here, because I want there to be a running kind of theme with this. This movie, and I don't care if I'm biased or not, this movie has the stones to compete with any Marvel movie that's out right now. I promise you. Just think of the parallels. Try to think outside the box a little bit. But everything we're going to be talking about here, apply it to modern Marvel and DC movies, and tell me this wouldn't be successful. So, okay. Well,
yeah.
That's enough my editorializing. Let's get back to the story.
Let's go back to the cast here. There's a lot of Italiano, Parmesan, and mozzarella in the cast.
Yes,
too.
there's certain. Yes.
But I didn't notice where it had been. It wasn't exact. I know it is probably some of De Laurentiis's stable mates, but this wasn't filmed in Italy. It was like it was filmed all in England, right?
It was all filmed in England. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So, the premise is set. Ming is going to destroy the Earth just for fun. So our movie, back on Earth, we get our first glimpse of our hero, Sam Jones, sitting in a very heroic station wagon.
I was going to go by and pick up the Brady's while we were there.
He's sitting at an airfield, waiting for a small little prop plane. And then from was the Green Harbor Inn, Mike? The shuttle from the Green Harbor Inn?
I think it was. He was staying there to clear his head.
Yeah, as was Dale Arden, who plays the extremely attractive and cute reporter that gets off the plane. Apparently, he had been stalking her the night before.
Did they ever? I can't remember. Did they explicitly say she works for like the New York Times or something, or is it just a journalist from New York?
I think at the end she says she's a New York City gal, so that's got to be one of those big papers, right? So
sure.
But she's unloading her bags, and apparently they've scheduled a small little like Cessna plane ride, and then Hagrid make sure they get on the plane okay. Robbie Coltrane in a really unnoticed role here. And as they get on the plane, the hot hail starts hitting, Mike.
Hot hail, yeah. Big balls of fire.
So they introduced themselves to each other, and you can tell they're kind of sweet on each other already. And Flash is good enough to sign the pilot's copy of People magazine that has Flash on the cover.
Yeah, it's interesting how they're able to do the exposition that quickly and that easily. I mean, I did appreciate that.
That's smart. Yeah, except for his son Buzz. So as they get on the plane, they start taking off, and they hit a little turbulence. And as that's happening, we cut back to a model of a greenhouse laboratory inhabited by Dr. Hans Zarkov, played by Topol, and his lab assistant Munson.
I guess does Munson get run over by the plane?
I think he does.
Assumption he is dead. Okay.
So they're sleeping in their cots and their clothes, and some of the hot hail bursts through the roof of the glass and lands on Munson's lap, and he wakes up and he realizes that there's no sun. And I think it was 8:24 in the morning, Mike, and there's no sun.
There's no sun.
So
they have chunks of the moon being thrown out.
Yeah. So he lets this be known to Zarkov, and Zarkov's got a history through some very conveniently placed news footage. NASA scientists are saying this is an unprecedented eclipse, but they say there's no cause for alarm.
Yes, another great exposition dump that's done in like 30 seconds. They found out Hans Zarkov is formerly of NASA, and he's in wacko job.
Yeah, the rub is that Zarkov has figured this out for a long time ago, and he's known about this, but no one believes him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't you like it when Munson actually used the word cowabunga?
Cowabunga.
It was. I found that fascinating.
See, that's why I hired you, Mike. You see those things that I don't. I love that.
And how can they? I mean, literally, it's like pitch black outside, or like really gray, and he's supposed to check the angular vector of the moon. I don't. I mean, I know the whole premise is the moon is approaching Earth, but like, how was that possible? How was Munson supposed to be able to do that? I don't know.
I think these are the things that are the slippery slope we don't want to go down.
There's some science that I want to ask you about later.
Yeah,
along with some special effects.
Right. So speaking of special effects, so that they cut back to the plane and they're having some rough turbulence there, and so
Flash is taking flying lessons. By the way, he says that sometimes air rises above the clouds.
Yeah.
I love that term.
Duh. But he didn't finish for the landing lessons though, did he?
No.
So the end result of this is that, environmental and climatological disasters start hitting the plane, and there's this big like rock that smashes into the front of the plane. And this kind of scared me as a kid because you can see like an overexposed red version of Ming. Comet that hits him. And Flash runs up to the front cabin and sees no one's driving the plane. So he and Dale kind of get on the controls and then they crash land into Zarkov's little miniature model.
Little greenhouse. Yeah. So Ming literally just abducts the pilot somehow and then go through the front of the plane. It's kind of you're right about that. That was actually scary. Pretty creepy.
But there's this horrible plane crash miniature set where and what I like here is so Zarkov's decided that he wants to go up and counterattack. So he's built a spaceship in the middle of the laboratory, and he tries to get Munson to go with him, and Munson won't go, and he runs away. And he says,
"Haven't you any spirit at all?"
I love that.
Munson goes,
No.
And then he sees the Flash Gordon's plane speeding towards them, and he crashes into him, and he gets run over. And then, spiritless Munson gets killed again in a movie, Mike.
Yeah.
Spirit Munson. Yeah. This is a hell of an introduction, but Zarkov goes and takes care of Flash and Dale and says, "You guys, you want to use my phone? It's right in there." And he steers it towards the spaceship, and suddenly he's got his passengers again, his co-pilots, and he pulls them in there at gunpoint, and there's some fisticuffs and there's some roughhousing, and Zarkov hits him over the head with the gun. And then the door slams shut, and then they're off into space, Mike.
Just like that, and then you get a nice little, drum solo too. That's pretty cool.
Yes,
I always remember that was as a kid.
Great drum.
And their spaceship is spinning through like this black hole, kind of looking portal.
Yeah, and you start to see some of the gaps in Zarkov's design for the spaceship. So, you have to put your foot on this red pedal to keep yourself from getting killed from the G-forces, but he puts it on the other side of his pilot seat. So you have to have a co-pilot to put their foot on. This is stupid.
It is funny because as we go along with this, you're gonna find out that we're making fun of a lot of this kind of cheapness, but it's also kind of the charm of it. Even the It's just kind of a harkens back to, like you were saying, the serials from the 30s and 40s, like the Commander Cody and the Flash Gordon's, kind of those little episodic shows that were so corny and so like cheaply done,
Yeah.
And you can I've made fun of this movie before with the special effects, but like I said, that's kind of the charm of it in a way,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and until I was probably like 40, I didn't even notice the special effects. I think we talked about this a little before in a previous episode. These things were designed for kids, and those 30s little serials were designed for the kids in the matinee to keep in the theater, keep them buying popcorn, and for their target audience, they work. They sit and cheer at these things. So, all right, so back to the movie. So there's some really cool visual effects here. I mean, obviously the CGI wasn't a thing, but they do some neat compositing. Some of the clouds and the nebulas and the galaxies.
Yeah, it was reminiscent of the Star Trek motion picture kind of effects where they show space and space clouds.
So that they're flying through the galaxy, and they kind of get picked up on by Ming's flight control by this there's this robot guy with like goggles. You remember the guy?
Oh yeah, those are
remember
creepy.
Lobot from Empire Strikes Back?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
This is the same guy wearing the same kind of apparatus in Flash Gordon, same actor.
Oh really? The same guy? Okay.
True story.
Oh
But
my
they
gosh.
see it. They see him incoming, and they bring him through the sea of fire, and they land him, and he ends up crashing just outside of on the planet Mongo, right outside of Ming's palace.
Mungo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is where a weird analogy. This is the scene in The Wizard of Oz where you go from black and white
Yeah.
to color, right? So after this, everything is beautiful and colory and shiny, and just it's got this amazing aesthetic to it that I haven't seen a whole lot of movies that can compare to. The imagery of this movie is just fantastic. But the guards come up who have these amazing costumes, and Flash goes to like shake their hand, and they shoot this like gun that like chokes him down and flips him around,
And the gun shoots out golden hands that grab him. I love that.
yeah, this is great. So they get
And they kill the poor lizard man too. I feel
I
bad
know.
about
How
the
about
lizard
that?
guy.
Rude.
He's just running down the hallway.
So these like jackbooted thug Gestapo type guys bring him inside Ming's palace, and they're in the middle of like some sort of a ceremony where everybody's paying their tidings, their homages
Oh
to
yeah. As
to Ming.
there's $18 million of the $20 million budget in that throne room scene with all
This-
those costumes.
Yeah,
and whatnot.
this is like the chocolate room scene in Willy Wonka. There's
Yeah.
so much going on here. You have to watch it like 50 times to see everything that's going on. It was surprisingly smaller the second time that when I just watched it. It wasn't a cast of thousands. There's probably 80 actors on the set altogether.
All right.
But just amazing costumes and amazing set design. Just it just makes it feel bigger than it is. And you get introduced to all the colonies of Mongo, but before they do that, you get this main entrance by Ming, and you get
yes.
that heavy synth entrance music where he walks
Oh,
in.
yeah.
I love how he's always like twiddling his fingers, like
Yeah, he's always,
he's cracking his knuckles, like it's this evil.
I like
evil-
yeah, I like the way he's addressed as Emperor of the Universe and Emperor of the Galaxy. I'm like,
Pick one.
one of those is good.
No, he was ruler of the universe, emperor of the galaxy.
Oh,
That's
ruler
what
of the universe.
ruler.
Okay.
Because I guess they're so different.
They are very, very different.
All right, so this is where the protagonists meet the bad guy for the first time, and Zarkov introduces himself as a scientist, and Flash introduces himself.
Who are you?
Flash Gordon, quarterback, New York Jets.
and Ming doesn't care about that. He's just kind of into Dale, and he
Dale,
puts on he
bring
puts
me
in
your.
this. He uses a little ring and puts her
Oh,
in
yeah.
some sort of like sultry coma dance.
Talk about a scene you don't understand as a kid watching. It's
Yeah,
like,
it doesn't play well now.
what's he doing with that ring? Is he?
Yeah.
Okay.
I
I don't know, but it was pretty sensational.
It was sensational. It was so sensational that he decided that he wants to bring in Dale as his bride and just dump the other two. And of course, Flash isn't going to have that. And he says,
This Ming's a psycho.
This Ming is a psycho.
Who said that?
The fair-haired prisoner.
and the little
Oh, yeah.
robot tour guide announces it. And he tells on him, tattletale. And it sets up ultimately this great set piece here where there's this big fight, the first big fight scene of the movie.
Yeah. Football.
Yeah, where Flash uses his inherent football skills to beat the crap out of the Royal Guard.
Yeah. This is when you have to be kind of invested in the movie, and if you're
Yeah.
not, you kind of roll your eyes, go, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah,
what am
you
I
don't make
watching?"
it
kind of
past the
thing.
scene, right?
Yeah,
If you're
this is
not-
where this is probably where a lot of TVs would click off at that point. Like, oh
But
my
the
gosh.
but the other tribes, they're so you got the Hawkmen, led by Prince Volt and Brian Blessed, who I think in hindsight they probably should have lengthened their shorts a little bit.
Yeah, there's a couple of Buffalo shots of
Yeah,
Volton.
needless-
I didn't need to see.
Yeah, and then of course you got the people from Arborea, which is Timothy Dalton, Prince Baron. That was going to be our hero, and several other bikini clad cultures and dwarf cultures. Just everybody got their own unique aesthetic and really cool.
And
But
there's there's Deep Roy. He's a pet. He's Fellini.
He's a pet. Yeah.
He's Fellini.
He's Fellini.
Come along, Fellini.
So
Oh, yeah.
this little dwarf tribe has these like exotic kind of like Fabergé egg things that look just similarly just the same size as football. And so Flash takes these footballs and starts flinging them at people and bonking people on the head. But unfortunately, Dr. Zarkov throws one errant pass and clunks him in the head, and the fight's over. Dale's taken into custody. Zarkov's determined they're going to erase his brain, which is will be a great scene we'll get here in a minute. And they decide they're just going to kill Flash Gordon. He's going to be executed. So the next scene is the execution scene. They just get right to it, Mike.
Yeah.
They put him in this exotic gas chamber, and meanwhile, Princess Aura, who is Ming's daughter, develops a little crush for him, and she uses her lover, the Imperial Surgeon, to give him a little shot before he gets gassed that'll revive him. So after he's gassed out, the great guitar work here for this.
Oh, yes, another one of those little solos like we saw before. But yeah.
And even the music here, this is Freddie Mercury's voice doing some of the instrumentals. He's like doing the intonations and it's his falsetto soprano voice doing a lot of the music here, which I thought was really cool. He comes back from the dead, and
Back from the dead.
she's going to use him as like her little boy toy. So she just decides she smuggles him out and takes him on an airship to her boyfriend's planet. Her boyfriend is Prince Baron. So she's going to take her boyfriend to her boyfriend. Didn't really think that one through, I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
But she wanted her cake and wanted to eat it too on the way to Arboria.
As this is happening, Dr. Zarkov gets strapped to a table and gets his memory erased, which this scene always scared me as a kid.
This is another creepy one, yeah.
So they essentially had this like big MRI that they pointed in his brain, like a James Bond laser type thing, and he gets to see all his memories erased on this big screen as it's happening to him real time.
And a lot of his memories involve
a third person perspective.
Yeah, and tigers and owls, oddly enough.
Yeah.
A lot of animals. And Hitler, he showed some promise.
They called out Hitler, give him a prop, give him a shout out. I like this Hitler guy.
Yeah, I love that Clytus line. That's a fabulous.
But it was a great scene. I think it was directed by a special director that did that.
Yeah, I saw that in the credits. They had somebody specially credited for that.
Yeah.
Thought transference machine sequence.
And the thought is that he's going to be reprogrammed to be an Imperial agent. And then Dale is getting prepped to be Ming's lover. Pretty much it. So as Aura's taking Flash to Arboria, she puts on a little telepathy helmet and she reaches out to let him know. And Flash says, "Hey, I want to use that to talk to Dale." And he, of course, she's using all her sultry and sexiness to convince him that he doesn't want to do that. But he ends up thinking to Dale and tells him that he's still alive, and that motivates Dale to try to escape. And movie just really gets going.
Yeah, it's not one of those scenes I'm like, we'll touch on this later, but it kind of probably hurt its box office when you see like, who are they going for here? You got this Aura like all climbing all over Flash and getting in his lap and like blowing in his ear.
It's Cinemax.
This all of a sudden turned a little, turned a little interesting.
Yeah. They finally land in Arboria. Aura presents Flash Gordon to Prince Baron.
Oh, he's not happy. He's not.
Yeah, he's not. He doesn't take it well.
And let's talk about the Arborian way they kind of cull the herd. I mean, they must have that. They must keep their population kind of low if every one of their initiations involves some guy sticking his hand in some log that has a scorpion creature in it.
So what Mike's talking about here is the Arborian culture has a test of manhood where all men of age have to go to this temple, and this is important later, so hear me out. And there's this wonderful, knotty stump in the middle of the floor, and inside this stump is probably the most horrifying cinematic creature I've ever seen in my life.
It's up there, yeah.
It's a little bloated bag scorpion tail thing that lives in the wet leaves.
Who in the heck would want to live on Arboria?
I don't know. This place sucks. But they have to stick their hand inside this stump, and if the beast stings them, then they're not worthy. If they survive, then they can be, part of the Arborian culture. So that's the first thing Flash Gordon sees when this happens. But because he's around Aura's finger, she makes him do it, and then she shuttles back to Ming's castle, where she's quickly found out Clytus, who's Ming's right-hand general, suspects that she used her lover, the Imperial Surgeon, to revive Gordon, and starts to interrogate her, and comes to that conclusion, gets a confession by putting the boar worms.
The boar worms.
Not the
Yes.
boar worms, right?
Oh, not those.
But at this point, Aura finds out that her father not only is accepting of this treatment, he initiated it. And that, so she kind of breaks, she breaks away from her father, and she does like a face turn, as they say in wrestling. She goes, she's had enough of Ming and didn't know what her father was, and now she's decided that that's not something she wants to be part of. So Mike, I'm looking at the clock, and just like, when you're watching sitcoms as a kid and it gets to the end of the half hour and you're thinking, hey, they're not going to wrap this up in time.
I know. It's like one of those serials if you watch as a little kid in the movie theater in the 30s.
Like, so they're still in the cave.
No.
They're not going to make it home to the.
Oh, no. They just put Flash in a cage and they're lowering him into the swamp.
This can't be it. So I think for the first time ever, gang, we're going to pick up. We're going to have to do a two-parter here, Mike, because I don't think anybody wants to.
We've gone too long, haven't we?
No one wants.
Yeah, we've been droning on.
I don't want people to have to listen to us for 2 straight hours. So our apologies, guys. We did not expect this to happen, but I think we're gonna leave this one on a cliffhanger, just to share the comment. See what we did there, guys.
And this is Justin. This is our football throne room scene.
So guys, I think we'll just do it more justice. I think what we'll do is we'll pick this up again for our next episode. We hope you come back to hear the thrilling conclusion of Flash Gordon. So we're gonna do something unprecedented. We're gonna wrap this up in the middle of the story and break it into a two-parter for both of our conveniences, quite frankly. All right, so following week we'll have thrilling conclusion. So for Mike James, this is Justin, and we will see you again for part 2 next time.
Bye-bye.
Gordon's alive!